I now want to talk to you about an American artist from the United States who's Georgia O'Keeffe. She was a very successful woman artist and is particularly, of course, well known in the United States. She is among the earliest American artists dealing with abstract forms. So she is really in the forefront of the new modernism defined by abstraction. Her forms are generally very bold, and she will take a natural object, or sometimes a man-made object in the case of her early skyscrapers, but a natural object, and then she can simplify these to what seems to be a totally abstract form, or sometimes becomes a totally abstract form. She has really a new point of view because her abstraction is a bit different. She's not looking to see what did the Europeans do. She's not drawing her abstraction, for example, from Cézanne or Picasso or Matisse, but she is basing her abstraction on nature. Now, sometimes people think that sounds a little contradictory, but you can have abstract forms that are drawn from natural forms, and you'll be seeing that with Georgia O'Keeffe. She wanted to be an artist from a very early age, and she studied at the School of the Chicago Art Institute from 1905 to 6, and then she went to New York and studied at the Art Students League from 1907 to 8. She was a good student. She won the William Merritt Chase Prize for still life painting at the Art Students League. The training there, however, was very traditional. She did still lifes. She drew from casts. They had life drawings. By this time, women are allowed to draw from life. But it wasn't very satisfying to her. And she said a lot of people had done the same kind of painting before I came along. It had been done, and I didn't think I could do it any better. And she simply stopped painting, and she destroyed her work. She worked as a commercial artist. She worked as a art teacher in the public school system. But it wasn't until a few years later, in 1912, she went to some, she was taking some summer school for, I think it was University of Virginia. And the professor, the professor there, Bemet, introduced her either I found one source saying he introduced her to Arthur Dove, and another said, I found one source that said he introduced her to Arthur Dow, and another one said he introduced her to the ideas of Arthur Dow. So possibly she heard about his ideas and then was introduced to him. But Arthur Dow was a teacher at the Teachers College at Columbia University, as was Bemet. And Dow was very interested in Oriental art. And his theory was that art should reflect personal feelings, personal ideas, and rather than simply imitate the world, it would be a harmonious arrangement of line and color and light and shade. And this opened up all sorts of possibilities for her of doing something that, you know, wasn't simply repeating what everyone had done in the past of imitating nature. She went to Columbia Teachers College and took classes. And during this period, she started to experiment with pure abstraction. She did a series of abstract charcoal drawings, and then later she added color and worked with watercolors. Now, she had this series of drawings that were, you know, purely abstract, and one of her friends showed them to Alfred Stieglitz. In fact, they even had the date he showed it, the 1st of January, 1916. Now, Alfred Stieglitz was probably the most famous photographer of the time. He also had a gallery in New York called 291, at which some of the most innovative, new modernist artists were being shown. Arthur Dove, that's a little bit different than Arthur Dow, Marsden Hartley, Charles Demuth in painting, Paul Strand in photography were some of the artists that were showing at his gallery. Well, when he saw these drawings, he immediately got in touch with Georgia O'Keeffe, started corresponding with her at first, of course, then met her. And within a few months, in May, he was exhibiting her work at the gallery. She exhibited some of these charcoal drawings. Now, that didn't go over really well with his male artists. I'm sure they came around, but at first, they didn't really seem to think that a woman should be showing at this gallery. But when they saw what she was doing, Arthur Dove made a very interesting comment. He said, "That girl is doing without effort what all we moderns have been trying to do." Now, I'm sure he meant it as a compliment. He's saying, "Yeah, gee, we've been trying so hard to do this, and here she goes and does it." You know, she understands the principles of abstraction and modernism that we're all struggling with. But the way he expresses it is the kind of thing that women run up to over and over again. They do something innovative, they do something outstanding, and it's trivialized by the language that's used. Today, we'd be very sensitive to the fact that he calls her a girl. Well, she was a young lady, and frankly, you know, they would have never said a boy if it was a young man the same age, but that was what was said. So yeah, that's a little trivializing. But the big thing that really, to me, is something that bothers me is the words "without effort." It's almost like saying, well, you know, these women, they don't have to think. They're close to nature. You know, going back to what? Ancient Greek and medieval and Renaissance negative ideas about women. And, you know, sort of saying, well, it's easy for them. You know, she's just doing it without effort. And that has all those assumptions that biologically aren't really true, but, you know, people still seem to react that way. Here we are in the 20th century, and they're still playing that women as nature rather than intellect card. And it seems to imply that, you know, she's not making choices, she's not making intellectual decisions. And ironically, when she talks about her work, as we'll hear, she does talk about her artistic choices. So I think it's interesting because she was very successful. But even so, even when someone was praising her, they make it sound like it wasn't as great a success, as it were. O'Keeffe and Stieglitz got to know each other. They fell in love. They were married. They had a very successful marriage. And Stieglitz, even after he closed his gallery, he continued to arrange exhibitions of her art in a number of the New York galleries. Her work was a financial success. It became very popular, and one of the interesting things is that in 1928 she sold a series of 6 paintings of calla lilies for $25,000. Now you might say $25,000 for 6 paintings. Today that may not sound like a lot, but at the time that was the highest price ever paid for the work of a living American artist. Not a living American woman artist, of a living American artist. So I don't know whether the boys had to accept, the boys had to accept her, her success, or whether they were a little jealous of it. But she had the right connections, and she was successful. As I said, they had a wonderful marriage. Stieglitz died in 1946, and after that, O'Keeffe moved to New Mexico, where they had been visiting before. you can look at, sort of group some of the subject matter of her artwork in different periods. During the 1920s, she does a series of skyscrapers when she's working in New York. And we're going to see City Night and the Radiator Building from 1926 and then 1927. And then I think about 1919 or so, she starts painting flowers. And all from the 20s and onward for decades, she does her very famous flower paintings. She also does many, many paintings of Western subjects. Landscapes, bones, different things. She had been visiting New Mexico since 1929. And then after the death of her husband, she left New York and moved permanently to New Mexico. So let's go and look at some of the work. This is City Night from 1926. As you're seeing, you're looking up at these very monolithic forms of the skyscrapers. They come in sort of at the diagonal, moving up to the sky. It's a very unusual perspective. You have these perpendicular forms, these very geometric forms. And one of the interesting things about it is sometimes people say, oh, how masculine, because they are geometric forms. They're black and gray and white and dark blue, dark colors. As though women only could paint pale pastels or something. So powerful image. This is the Radiator Building. In this case, you're looking straight on at the building at night in New York, with all of the lights forming in the all the lights in the windows forming light geometric forms, light rectangles against the larger rectangle of the skyscraper and the other buildings in New York. From about the 1920s on, she started doing these very, very large flower pictures. She would blow up the flowers so that you'd be looking very, very closely at them. And this was a different type of image than anyone had ever painted flowers before. I mean, now, I know photographers will do this a lot, and it's become something that we do see. But with O'Keeffe, it was new. Taking the flowers and making them so they're still recognizable, but in a sense they become abstract shapes. And I should at this point mention one other thing that's often said about her work. Many people look at the flower images and will say, this is feminine genitalia and it has a sexual meaning. And I think they also might try that with the male image of the skyscrapers. Georgia O'Keeffe most adamantly denied that. But Georgia O'Keeffe adamantly denied that. She said that her art is about her own artistic choices. And I think, that's a significant point. Some people like to read things into paintings that aren't there. Sometimes the artist is amenable to it. In this case, she said that's not what this is about. I wanted to show you a series, and I don't think I have everything from the series, but I have most of the pictures. This is her series of the Jack in the Pulpit, and I don't have number 1, as you can see. But this is Jack in the Pulpit 2 from 1930, and it's a progression. She starts out with this very close-up image of the Jack in the Pulpit with its rich, dark reds contrasted to the leafy greens surrounding it. And each image goes from what can be seen as a, sort of a close-up, very naturalistic view to complete abstraction. And each one becomes more and more abstract. So here, a bit more simplified, interesting play of positive and negative shapes, the negative shapes in Jack in the Pulpit 3 being the blue sky with the white clouds that we can see behind the forms. And then, so we're getting really, really close up. Jack in the Pulpit 4. You see organic shapes, very simplified. You might not even know it was a Jack in the Pulpit if someone hadn't told you, if you just saw this shape. And then here we have 5, in which you have this wonderful curving, swirling little arabesque that's repeated. Once again, she's playing with the rich, deep reds and deep, reddish, bluish violets, and contrasting this to the different pale greens. And then Jack in the Pulpit 6. Actually, yeah, Jack in the Pulpit, yes. And then Jack in the Pulpit 6. There is no way that you would know that that stems from flower painting. It's completely and purely abstract. So you can see what we're talking about when we say she is deriving her abstraction from nature. She is seeing the artistic choices in natural objects. Now, not all of her work is natural objects. This is called Blue and Green Music, and she did a few paintings of music in which they are pure abstraction. And of course, this is one of the questions that art historians always ask. Some people, are perfectly happy if a musician plays a symphony and there's not a sound in it that imitates the natural world. Music is allowed to be purely abstract. But when artists started to create works of art that were purely abstract, that had no subject from the visible world, some people were outraged. And you still run into people today who said, oh, they can't draw, they can't paint, as though the only thing in art was imitation, which is, as George O'Keeffe and many other artists have said, that's been done. We want to do something different and new and expand the ideas about what art is. So she's using music here as the metaphor, but also the idea of visual harmonies, of color, of shape, of texture, of line. I get very interested in these that are so very simple. That's something that I particularly admire because I guess I don't always know when to stop. And this is a black abstraction from 1927. It looks kind of like a round ball shape, whatever, with the white slash at an angle through it. Some of her work is very recognizable. She does some architectural forms. You see stables from 1932, just very simple. And then going right up close, Lake George window from 1929. It looks more like a door, actually, but a door with a window in it. Seeing the geometric forms in this case, architectural or man-made objects. She'd visited New Mexico, as we said, since 1927. She'd visited New Mexico since 1929, and she made it her permanent home after 1949. Probably one of her most famous works is the cow's skull, red, white, and blue, in which she has this skull of a cow, sort of a Western subject, where, of course, the great herds of beef cattle, take up a great deal of the landscape. And then behind it, not exactly an American flag, but the colors of an American flag, red, white, and blue. Sort of this is an American painting. And it becomes a kind of iconic American painting because it could be referring to the American West. And I think you can probably add a lot of different symbolism to it. Is there some death imagery? Are you talking about the industry? Some things that she probably didn't intend we can add to it, but should we do that? I don't know. It's been suggested that the cow's skull forms a kind of cross, and some symbolism perhaps being attached to that. And of course, George O'Keeffe did use crosses in some of her paintings. We see here the Black Cross from New Mexico of 1929. And that is related to the Spanish and Mexican heritage of the American Southwest. And we also see the Ranchos Church, which has these very monolithic architectural forms, but they don't really look like a building. They become abstracted. She also, one of the things that I find very interesting is she did a lot of these very simple forms. Of course, there's a strong influence from Mexico in the American Southwest and from the Spanish. And so she uses the crosses sometimes. So here is this black cross, New Mexico. So you're right up close to it and then can see the landscape behind it. Ranchero's Church, just absolutely simplified forms. You wouldn't even realize that was an architectural structure, perhaps. Just, you know, what is it? One of the things that Georgia O'Keeffe is known for are her paintings of bones. And you've already seen one of the skulls, and she often, you know, has the animal skulls. But this is a different part of the anatomy. This particular painting, Red Hills and Bones, makes a relationship between the dry earth of New Mexico, which are the red hills, and the shape of bones, vertebrae, and quite exactly what that is, a tibia maybe, lying in the foreground. And so there is the, you know, this idea of the parched, arid landscape, which is like the bones of the earth, perhaps. One of the things that I'm fond of is her Pelvis series. And I think the reason I like this, of course, part of it is just the cool colors, the different shades of white, a little bit warmer, and then the cool blue backgrounds. But also, I think one thing is she's taken a naturalistic object, and by taking it out of, you know, the context of just, you know, being a bone in a skeleton or, you know, display case in a museum or something like that, it becomes an abstract shape, and she's really showing the beauty of these bones, pelvis bones. So we're looking here at pelvis with the distance, in which you're seeing a horizon in the background, and the pelvis is just kind of floating there. We're looking through it and seeing a sky. And then pelvis with the moon, where the same thing, different angle, different point of view, with these wonderful curving shapes, and once again, you know, likened in a sense to the curving shape, the circle of the moon. And then the pelvis, which you're looking at very, very closely. So if you didn't know it was from the Pelvis series, you would have no idea. You would say that this is one of her completely abstract works. And then he goes even closer, and you're looking right through the hole, and you're seeing the moon in one and just the sky behind it. And in all of these cases, you have something that's a perfectly naturalistic object. It's portrayed, you know, realistically without perhaps all the little details, but it appears to be an abstract form. And I find that so intriguing. It makes you look at nature and objects in a totally new way. One of the other things that I particularly am interested in with Georgia O'Keeffe is some of her very, very late works that got very, very simple. This one, Winter Road. All it is a black line on a presumably painted white canvas. I've never seen it, so I'm looking at the reproduction, and I'm struck by just the beauty of the line, how it swells and curves. And then, because you have the name Winter Road, you realize that what it is this is a plowed road going through the hills, which are completely covered with the snow, and nothing's walked on them, and there hasn't, you know, they haven't started melting. It's just completely snow-covered hills, snow-covered landscape with this ribbon of the road going through it.